Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in for day one live stream for Starry Nite Arts Festival. My name is Ria Sampillo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second generation Filipino American based in Houston, Texas. I'm a co-director for Starry Nite Arts Fest 2021 and one of your MCs for tonight. I am currently on the OCA Arts and Storytelling Committee, and I also organize for the Filipinx community here in Houston and a founding member of UniPro Texas chapter. So I also want to hand it over to my co-MC, Trish.
Thank you, Ria. Hello, everyone. My name is Trisha Morales. My pronouns are she, her. I am a 1.5 generation proud Filipino American based in Houston, Texas. I organized for the Filipinx community, was part of the co-founding team for the Texas chapter of UniPro, also part of OCA Art and Storytelling Committee, and also one of the co-directors for Starry Nite Arts Fest.
Yes. So before we begin Starry Nite Arts Fest, we want to take a moment for land acknowledgement. I personally want to share that I'm continuously learning and recognizing my own place in history of colonization, working to unlearn any actions, behaviors that may silence others or perpetuate systemic oppression. I want to take part and also encourage all of you to uplift and connect the cultural legacies that existed and continue to exist here today. We acknowledge that we occupy stolen land. The lands that make up Texas are home to the Alabama Coachella tribe of Texas, the Kickapoo traditional tribe of Texas, the Ysleta del Sur Pueblo, the Lipan Apache tribe, and the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians. We acknowledge the many systemic erasure of these tribes and recognize they're still among us today. We acknowledge the peoples of these nations, their cultures, their communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We acknowledge and offer deep gratitude to the land and waters in which we stand upon. If not in Texas at the moment, you can find whose land you're occupying here, nativeland.ca. Thank you so much for taking the moment with us, and I want to hand it over to Trish for OCA's mission and vision.
Thank you, Ria. So OCA mission and vision is to advance the social, political, and economic well-being of the AAPI community. We do this by providing different programs such as our bystander training, which is in response to the increased rise of anti-Asian American harassment and anti-hate towards marginalized communities of color. OCA is providing educational and awareness tools to combat these types of systematic oppression. The Situational Awareness Workshop is a free 1.5-hour interactive training to teach people on how to be a confident and effective bystander against racism and discrimination. Currently, OCA Greater Houston is also doing a GOTV Get Out to Vote campaign, reaching out to the AAPI community to remind everyone to register to vote for the municipal elections coming up this November that include the HISD Board of Trustees, and we are knocking on 50,000 doors. We also have many youth programs, which the lovely Abby will discuss later on. And lastly, you all are tuned into OCA's Starry Nite program. But before we talk about Starry Nite Arts Fest, I want to highlight folks who are doing all the behind the scenes live stream production and behind the scenes work in general. This event wouldn't be possible without them. Everyone, let's welcome Maria Duran. She's the backstage manager. Let's go. Oh, this way. Yes. And then, of course, shout out to Abby for doing the programming for youth, and then Albert for being amazing and also doing so much of the back end work and marketing during the event itself. So thank you. All right. Oh, okay. So on to Starry Nite's mission and vision. Starry Nite Festival was created to highlight and celebrate the diversity of AAPI artists, culture, and community, and to share the untold AAPI experience for the greater Houston metropolitan area through a shared AAPI community space. Organized by a dedicated team of volunteers to benefit community nonprofit organizations and AAPI artists, the mission of Starry Nite Festival is to promote AAPI artists, craftspeople, and entrepreneurs, and to create an AAPI community space that promotes civic engagement and Asiatown Houston as a cultural destination for the arts. So pre-COVID, we would all gather in Bel Air on Corporate Drive in front of the East and West Bank. It would be a night of market, like food, music, community artists, and performers, right? Celebrating each other's stories. Last year was our first virtual festival, which was in December, which Ria will talk about next. This year is our second virtual festival.
Yes. So just a recap of last year. Of course, since COVID, everything shifted virtually. And the theme last year was giving, right? And we broke it up into 4 pillars. So giving back to the community, giving up old habits because we all, went inward and reassessed what was happening, giving space for unheard voices, and giving yourself time to heal. So that is, you can actually access our last year's festival still on our website, archived on our website, if you missed out on it or didn't get to attend. But yes, we wanted, and this year, we want to build upon that conversation as we continue forward in community conversation. So as Trish and I were, brainstorming for the theme for this year, we wanted to have a play on, the festival name itself, Starry Night, right? And so we were throwing some words around, and we kept coming back to the word constellations, right? And so with constellations, as all of you know, like there's always a story, there's always folklore behind that. And the stars are used, or at least for our ancestors, a way to guide and to navigate across waters, to navigate to where they're going, right? And so so the theme this year is we ask the community to be the same reflection as the night sky. So as a star, as you share your own story, you get to see the connections that you have with other AAPI stories, other AAPI identities, right? And so not only is that our conceptual theme, community constellations, but this exploring the histories and the narratives, our stories also is prompting us to talk about yes, we're doing this in the community, but what does that look like in terms of our education system? What will it look like if we continue to share our stories in different spaces, right? And so, this festival is also a way to kick off the community conversation surrounding Asian American studies in K through 12 schools, right? And so, and we want to start now because the School Board of Education will have that conversation in 2022. And so we want to get started now. We want to continue to share our stories now. So beyond this festival, please do check out HCRE, Houston Collective Reimagining Education, so that, again, we can continue to have this conversation beyond the festival. And just a little bit about the festival programming. We do have an amazing lineup in the next, within the 4 days, starting today up until Sunday. We will be having artist talks, Q&As, book talks and Q&As, and live performances, and some submissions from some wonderful people, artists, performers. And also, we will be we have film screenings. You can check that out and register on our website. And so we will be screening American Revolutionary, The Evolution of Grace Lee Boggs, which takes us into Boggs' lifetime of vital thinking and action, traversing the major US social movements of the last century, from labor to civil rights to Black power, feminism, and the Asian American and environmental justice movements and beyond. And the next film screening we have is Sea Drift. So a dispute over fishing territory erupts into violence and ignites a maelstrom of boat burnings, KKK intimidation, and other hostilities against Vietnamese refugees along the Gulf Coast. So this feature documentary examines the circumstances that led up to the shooting and its dramatic aftermath, and reveals the unexpected consequences that continue to reverberate today. So that's a little bit about Sea Drift, and I'm so excited that we have these film screenings because they do connect with the conversations that we're having within the 4 days. Sea Drift specifically because it connects with Brandon Bell Harris's work. So again, our weekday programming, check out our website, register for these talks. And again, we're going to be closing this weekend with a youth roundtable about how to continue this conversation. So I will hand it off to Trish to highlight what is happening tonight.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, tonight, this lineup is amazing. I'm so excited. First, we will be having Nishiki Sugawara-Beda artist talk and Q&A. It will be broadcasted soon at 6 p.m. in 5 minutes. And then we're going to have a closed workshop, book talk and Q&A with ANDREA WANG, and she will be discussing her book Watercress and the Many Meanings of Melan. So please sign up on our website now. Then we will hop back on the live broadcast from 8 to 8:30, featuring amazing artists, performers, Resound A Cappella, Hyunja and Norman, and a third rendition of Ria and I's project AAPI Voice, which is a video piece collaboration with youth. Lastly, we will be ending the night with our Dear Asian Youth Roundtable, who are discussing their experience in our education system and the movement for Asian American K-12 ethnic studies movement here in Texas. So y'all make sure to register for all of our upcoming events.
Thanks, Trish, for the overview of the night. I also want to mention that we will be conducting raffles throughout the entire festival. So today's raffle is the Humankind Project sweater, and make sure you enter to win. The link is listed on the banner. And also every day of the festival, we will be featuring a community partner. And tonight we will be hearing from BPSOS. So Kevin Hong.
Hi, my name is Kevin Hong, and I have been interning at BPSOS Houston for the past 6 months. While BPSOS Houston provides a myriad of services to the Asian American Pacific Islander community, ranging from legal aid to emergency services at the onset of the pandemic and during Winter Storm Uri, my role has centered around another one of our mainstay services, preparing Asian American Pacific Islander community members for their citizenship interviews. Alongside our teaching team, my fellow one-on-one tutors, and countless volunteers, I work to ensure that our community members are ready for their interviews by brushing up on their US government and workshopping their English. More than that, though, these sessions are spaces for learning and bonding across generations. I'm a first-generation immigrant, meaning I was born in the US, but my parents were born in Vietnam. Growing up, there was definitely a distance between me and my Vietnamese roots. I didn't learn about Asian culture in school, and because of that, I wasn't really receptive to immersing myself into it at home. Hearing the stories and experiences of people from all across the Asian world, from Vietnam to Cambodia, from Nepal to India, has been so enriching and so powerful. This experience has also brought me closer to my roots and my culture and my family, and I cannot wait to learn more from our Asian American Pacific Islander community members as we work to uplift them throughout the citizenship process. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Ria. Before we start our first artist talking Q&A, we want to highlight a seasoned Starry Nite facilitator and the main youth organizer for OCA Greater Houston, Abigail Trino. So Abigail Trino holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Communication Studies with a personal focus on cross-cultural interaction from UT Austin. As an immigrant from the Philippines, Abby never thought she'd have the opportunity to intern in Japan or be celebrated for her Filipino-American identity as she balanced constantly changing cultural norms while growing up in the States. Throughout her journey, Abby has become an advocate for building bridges between people of all backgrounds and a voice that promotes diversity and cultural appreciation. Abby?
Hi. Hello. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here for the second time, and I look forward to tonight's lineup and also our first artist talk. And I have the pleasure of introducing her. Our first artist talk tonight is Nishiki Sugawara-Beda. She is a Japanese-American visual artist based in painting and installation, and has an MFA from Indiana University and a BA from Portland State University. She exhibits her work in solo and group exhibitions and offers lectures nationally and internationally to promote cultural diversity and exchange. Exhibition venues include Spartanburg Art Museum, Morris Graves Museum of Art, all the way in California, Denos Museum, and Amos Eno Gallery in New York. Publications include New American Paintings, Expose Art Magazine, AEQAI, the London Post, and many more. Awards including Seed Grant, Diversity Fellow Program, International Enhancement Grant, Idaho Art Fellow, and Sam Taylor Fellowship, which have supported her artistic research. She concluded her residency at the Tucson Talk Foundation in the summer of 2021, and currently she is an assistant professor of painting and drawing at SMU in Dallas, Texas. Everyone, please help me welcome in our first artist of tonight, Nishiki Sugawara-Beda.
Hi, you can hear me okay, I think. Well, thank you. Thank you for your welcome. And I'm just sort of beyond word to be able to kick off this wonderful event. And I would like to say, everybody was saying that the second generation, first generation, I guess I have to say I am an immigrant. I was born in Japan and moved to the United States, or settled in the United States in late 20. So it's been quite a while, and I would like to talk a bit about through my talk. And thank you, OCA Greater Houston, for inviting me to talk and connect with younger generation. This is something that I feel very honored to be able to do that. So I would like to start my presentation. And okay, here we go. So I can just move here. And so like a constellation is something that I come up with. Because once I heard the theme, it was perfect to come up with this sort of metaphor. You know, many stars in the sky, 100 billions. I didn't know. I just Googled, and I knew there are many, but it's 100 billions. And if we think that each little stars represent culture, then it's about right. Because we can think of continent, countries, regions, and cities and villages and organization, institutions, family, and you. And you today, you tomorrow might be a different kinds of culture that you embrace. So I would like to use this constellation metaphor to actively picking stars to make your own culture. And once you be more active, you are not finding it, you are making it. The more you know, you can choose and it just have fun with. So that's something that I would like to talk about, the approach that I'm using with my art. So my name is Nishiki Sugawara-Beda. An assistant professor of art at Meadows School of the Arts at SMU. So I live in Dallas, Texas. I'd like to start with 3 images. And the first image is this little silly world map. I was born in the USA. That's something that I want to say, but I was born in Japan. And little dots, red dot represent where I was working or where I visited. And the blue dot is the place where I've been living for the last 20 years. This is pretty key to me because I learned a lot of cultures and I needed something to digest all those experiences. So the art became almost a tool for me to digest and move forward with my experience. The second image is my work from 2007. If you read Japanese characters, you can just read kokoro no naka kara, which means just from my heart. So I wrote essentially from my heart and from my heart over and over to write and to make a scribble and became form, and I was using a form to represent what I was talking about, which is from my heart. The reason is that I was not sure what I wanted to say, but I knew how I wanted to say, which was from my heart. So authentic, sort of faithful communication from my heart to others. The third image is it's about mother. So in a small Japanese house compared to American standard, big room show up in a tiny living room because she wanted to make a cushion cover. So the cushion cover needs fabric, and fabric is, she wanted to make a silk fabric. And so she got a silk, and the silk came with white, so she needed to dye with this color. So she started growing the indigo in a little patio outside. But she didn't stop there. She just needed to just go through a bit farther to understand her materials. So she started to raise to grow a silkworm and got that cocoon. So for her, of course, in this amount, she won't be able to make silk from here. But she needed to go through the process. I inherited this kind of attitude by looking at, but also from DNA, I believe. I wanted to show you some images of my work from earlier work, 2014. You can kind of see the calligraphic element. I was using calligraphy because you are coming up with the word, and that meaning is, you need to transmit the meaning using the shape of the characters. And that was a wonderful approach to a mark making. So I was using heavily, or I was relying on heavily phrases and using those shapes to transmit that meaning. But soon and more, I dropped the appearance of calligraphy, but I was just remaining the approach to mark making. I made several series of work. This is called inaugural because I became mother around that time. So to celebrate not only my daughter's life, but my life as a new life as a mother, and to limit color palette to welcome new colors. So I started using more and more sumi, which is the black ink that you can see in my work. And you can still see the calligraphic element in this work, and you can see kind of dropping. So underneath there is a calligraphic element, but more and more it's just an abstract shape. But again, the mark making approach remains the same. In order for me to get a sincere mark making, I needed to be practicing mindfulness. And so I decided to go back to Japan to study traditional Japanese activities. And one of them is the tea ceremony, or chado. And this gentleman, Sodo Sensei, allowed me to follow him for over a week. Just everywhere he went, I was able to follow him, and he really told me a lot of things. It's not like he's teaching; he was really sharing the anecdote, and it was for me to get the meaning out of stories. It was a wonderful experience. And most of the traditional Japanese activities are rooted mindfulness mindfulness practice. So for me, it was just the first sort of big, deep dive into traditional activities. After I came back, I made a series of work. I can just show a couple for this about this talk. you can see the a little bit of frame around it. I hope you can see my castle. Like right here, there's a framing device. It was because there, when we were in the tea room and we were inside, and tea master was suggesting or encouraging me to feel outside. So I asked him, like, why we are inside and try to understand outside. And he just simply said that, you know, you can feel it when you are inside. No, just like that. But then what that conversation meant was that private self and public self should be the same all the time. And I try to be that way. I'm not doing 100%, but I try to be authentic in and out. And so those borders are reminder for me. As I was watching practitioners doing the same movement over and over to perfect the movement, and I was stunned to watch them, because each step they have to mean it. They are actually taking a step, not lightly, but at that moment they were present. So these marks I applied. And then erase by sanding, apply and sand to mimic that movement and to honor those practice or attitude towards perfection and succinct movement that developed over time. Another tradition, it is called tenkoku. Traditionally, they use soapstone, but for me, it's a modern take. So here is the stapler eraser, just carved with my X-Acto knife. And I don't go against dwell on each work, but this is a sculpture installation. And you can see, you can go under, walk around, and essentially the viewers can be part of that work. And each sculpture takes takes the shape of movie strip, and then each one of them will have a seal lined up in the middle. And of course, you can be underneath to be with it. So I'm talking about those research things that I studied, but those things are, to me, a star, like I was talking about, constellation. So little things that I learn, I can incorporate into my work. And not only the culture, like activities, but materials is something that I wanted to go into to origins. So sumi, naturally, is the main ink for calligraphy. And I wanted to know sumi culturally and scientifically. And because of the audience today, I decided to put a Chinese character for sumi. So you might know, maybe the pronunciation is different, but the background image is my work, so that I was still using a sumi with a different pigment together. So the acrylic was applied, ink was applied, but the sumi ink becoming more and more important element for me. Sumi is made of soot and animal glue, and comes in variety of shapes and different sizes like this. And you can kind of, again, it is beautifully made. Each one corner is treated with care, and comes in a different tones and depth in black and temperature. And you can see some of them are really blue, and that has a blue dye in it. And they also put red in it. But most of them just pure black. But when I say pure, it's just a soot black. But within the soot black, there are a variety of tones and, as I said, temperature. And the more I limit the color, I start seeing more color in black. Again, I wanted to know culturally, scientifically about sumi. So I went to Nara, Japan, where 95% of sumi is still being produced. And this place, Kobayen, is one of the oldest sumi shop, and the only sumi shop where they make their own soot in Nara. And to me, as a painter, soot is a coloring agent, and so it's like a pigment. So very important. And to be able to see the soot making like production room was really sacred room. They don't let you come in, but I beg them and I just show up, many times to show my respect so that I am sincere, and then just throw into a little educational element. Oh, I teach, so I would like to show it to my students. And finally, here is a picture of the production room. So this picture is in one room. There are 100 stations of the little lamp, and 2 rooms exactly the same right next to each other. And their oil and wick and the sizes like that you can see was that relative to the hand. One person attending each room pouring oil. So this is this is the oil they pour, and to the right and to the left there are 2 rooms. One person attending, and meanwhile he sits and make wick that you can kind of see inside. Every 15 to 20 minutes, he has to turn the lid clay so that the soot can collect evenly. And here's the him making, and you can kind of see the big bundle on his finger. He must have burned or something. So this is a picture of wick. It's already dried, so it looks brittle, but when he's making, it's a wetted reed. And another ingredients of sumi, like main ingredients, is animal glue. So horse hide, cow hide, water buffalo, turtle shell, and deer horn, and you can name it, all kinds of animal glue be used. Of course, fish as well. And then they make, so they mix soot and melted animal glue together to make a little jelly-like bulb, and put it in a wooden mold like this. And you can see on the right side, it's a big, but it's the same content. After being dried for 6 months or so, it will be to the left, like smaller sumi to the left. And this would be a station. So this is like a studio shot in a way for a studio artist. So this would be a really good picture. And I wanted to know more about things around it. So with sumi, you need a brush and paper and grinding stone. And I won't go deep into this today, but I was able to visit paper making shop. And I thought I wanted to show you some kind of funny image. So they cut, this is a mulberry bush, and they cut the bush part, and then every year it grows. But this year when I visited, the new sprout was eaten by a deer. So that's why there is a fence in front of it. So he was hoping that the DA is not going to come for this year. And so he's the maker. He's just way in the woods and making, and he's passionate about leaving the tradition to the next generation. I'm just throwing a picture of mulberry. It's a new bush, like just a new sprout. So I'm still mentioning about the stars, and in each culture I'm understanding. But to make my own, I feel like I have to do it on by myself. And I remember that I mentioned about my mother. I have to make my own, or at least experience it. So here's my humble looking sumi suit making production. So getting help by a chemist professor at my home university. This is the first attempt. And this is the second attempt. It's a little elaborative, I think, but I made a good amount of soot. And it's sort of scraped off, brushed off. And I did in the lab 2 batches of soot making. So you can obviously see in the left side, very excited, big jar, but just tiny little bit. That is my first batch. And the second batch is being very successful, very efficient. But I wanted to make my own soot from wood as well. And the chance came this summer. So at my residency, I was able to collect soot from wood. I made quite a few attempts. And for this picture is a red pine. And I'm just collecting from the sort of the other side of this cone shape, brushes off. And you can kind of see I smear, and it's kind of spread a lot. So it's really, really a tiny portion. But after 4 hours or so, I was able to collect soot like this much. So you can see now this is on the left side, that's the white pine. In the middle, that's cedar. The pine is better because it has a lot of sap in it. And here we go. This is the pine, so the white pine. But you can clearly see there are a lot, but still less than 1 gram. But this is about 8 hours of labor, and I was able to collect soot. But I hope you can remember this sort of visual of the soot, because here's the next one is a cedar. You can kind of see a little less oil. So now I really want to know what really constitutes chemically and maybe physically. So I'm working with the scientists who can sort of spare some time with me to understand what they are and how they behave. Any measurement would be really interesting. I was using tin foil to collect soot. So this is not really glamorous and beautiful, but in a way it became beautiful and practical. I also wanted to be in touch with the land. So at this place, I was able to collect creosote from the chimney of that specific location. And I made sure this chimney was only used for wood material. And so the soot, creosote is like a little bit grass-like texture. So I needed to grind to make it look like soot. So it is different, but it became powder, and I made my own sumi with it, or sumi stick. Well, maybe technically I might not be able to call sumi because I'm not using soot, but it's a creosote sumi-like stick is this. And this is very humble looking crumble looking sumi stick, but nonetheless, I think it's beautiful. So other ingredients is the glue. I was working with the aquatic animal biologist in Japan, and he suggested that I could just try to get glue out of it from jellyfish and pufferfish, because widely available in the food shop. So I was able to extract, after probably 4 hours of slowly getting it out, extract the gelatin, which is collagen, type of protein. And sort of cool looking incubator, and I was able to dry them. So the jellyfish and pufferfish on the right side, and I have to tell that the jellyfish was so smelly, and the apartment that was filled with the smell for the 2 days or so. I make my own ground because I want to know what's in it. So alabaster and talc are usually used for to make that ground. We call it gesso, and I put titanium white and zinc sometimes, and use a double boiler to make my own. So it mixes with the rabbit skin glue. That's the widely available animal glue in the Western setting. So understanding material is another culture as well. I met makers of materials and chemists and biologists and physicists. They all have their own culture. So by talking to them, I was able to just collect a few cultures into my own. And I wanted to share my recent work. Series called Kuro Kuro Shiro, which means black, black, and white in Japanese. And then this is the size of 6 by 12 inches, and gesso, the yuso, the ground, white ground, on wood. And sumi was applied very thickly at the this black area. And I started seeing, actually I have to credit my husband, who said landscape when he was talking about my work. And I realized that I was not aware of how I was organizing images on my work. But as soon as he said landscape, it made so much sense. I started making more, and I started seeing them as an internal and reflective landscape. We could call it more like spiritual landscape. It is easier for me to say that, so that the viewer can come in and then sort of navigate through that the space that was created. You can see here it's the black, very a thick black, and here opaque gray, and this area is transparent gray, because I was able to lift it up. Like when I wipe this ink, I was able to mix with the gesso, in this case a zinc white, so it became opaque. Zinc white is usually a bit more transparent, but with the ground it became the opaque gray. And I made more, and I'm still making more, but different shapes too. But the reason that I wanted to make more is the inspiration came from a shrine called Sanju Sangendo in Kyoto, Japan. There are 1,001 statues. And when I was growing up in Japan and visiting those historical places as a school child, I was encouraged to find one that speaks to you, or find one that is look like you. So my hope is that I'll make thousands of them, and the viewer can find one that speaks to them, maybe for that moment or for that day. Knowing the material is really just great, because it always gives me like something to innovate. I was studying the traditional doll making, and I soon noticed that the head that they make and they were carving is the content, the ingredients is exactly the same for my gesso, for my ground, for my painting, and they were curving it. So like, oh, so now I know I can curve onto my surface. So the right here on the right side, there are scratched mark, so that I was able to not only give textures, but also bring pure white to the mixture of black and gray. And I started making more vertical works, and there are beautiful on its own, but it was difficult for me to present. The paper is fragile, and it's by itself it's something lacking. So I decided to mount onto a traditional mounting called kakejiku. It was very challenging because this is during the COVID. So thanks to a Zoom, I was able to talk with merchant and see the materials via virtually. But it was difficult because the color it's just not the same, and so the grayish green was a little bit conflicting. And I know one of my colleagues just opened my studio door and then didn't say that the color is just something not working, and I was very sad, but at the same time it's like I knew that I had to do something. There are two things hanging from the top, usually traditionally, because in ancient time they were viewing the kakejiku outside. So the two little things hanging out was to scare swallow away, so the birds doesn't come and pick or poop. So I was able to hang right in the middle using a red color, and the red did it something beautifully to me. Also, I was able to add something to make whole kakejiku on my own, because kakejiku was beautiful, but essentially it's a frame. So my painting and frame, done by somebody, it just feels like it was not mine. But by adding the red, it became sort of my work. Inside of the red, there is a omikuji, because this is also something that the culture that I'm picking up. Omikuji is a fortune paper, and so I made my own. And I rolled them up and put them inside, so that and I shuffle them around. So it is still, I don't know which one in it, but all of them are very good fortune. So I was able to hang right in the middle and to make it as a whole work. And I would like to share another like recent works that sort of like experimentational work. Here is you can see the sort of wet area is animal glue on the bed of rocks. So I was in Upper Michigan, and the rocks are just so beautiful. And so I get the impression of rock, and then sprinkle that creosote that I collected. So the collected, harvested coreosid was sprinkled, and then I brushed over so that it became like that at the bottom too. And also I tried to incorporate the visual that I was in. So it's not only the materials, but also the direct observation was incorporated. So here are the rocks, and I tried to I tried to incorporate the rock formation in my paintings. I was talking to my artist colleague, and we were discussing Cézanne at that time. So this painting reminded me of Cézanne painting. So if you are not familiar, Cézanne has a multiple view in one painting. So this line doesn't match up with this, and I just really try to create a multiple point of view in this work. Here's another work. So I was looking at this view, all the time when I was painting. This is at the residency. I wish this is my studio. But here's a nice slope. And my painting has a little slope already, and then just over a sudden I realizing that this tree in the back needs to come in. So I painted that. And here's 2 trees in the backyard, and I was able to incorporate that too. So here's the set of 3 paintings that I did at the residency. So these work are the direct observation of the particular place with the very materials of that place. For this case, creosote. I would like to show a couple more images to end this my talk. I hope you are sort of jotting down the things that you can ask me. I hope people will have questions. This is the full 12 by 24. And again, it's just a landscape for me. For these paintings, I was able to use broom as a tool. When I was looking at broom that I got from Asian market, I was very excited because it looks like brush. And but soon I realized that broom is a broom. Didn't really hold water for me, but nonetheless, it really created a beautiful and interesting shapes. Here's another one that I made this summer. And Frank Gorky is the photographer, and that photograph was right outside my bedroom. And this image was inspired by that photograph. And here, that's the broom. And this one is, you can clearly see a different tones and different temperature that you can get with Sumi ink. Here is the black, that's a translucent black or transparent black. And here will be opaque black. That's a scratchy optical mixture gray. And then this is the last image of my work. This is a little bit different from what I usually do. And I think feels like maybe a departure for something. I'm not really sure, but it has a object and ground relationship, but yet it incorporates abstract language. And so I'm sort of pushing boundary one way or another, and I see how I'm going to develop works this fall and winter to come. And lastly, I wanted to share my excitement. Here is my full color art book that will be published by Execute magazine. And there will be a soft cover and hardcover. And soft cover will be available through Amazon's and online stores, and hardcover will be available by the Execute magazine exclusively. And the launch event is at the Pollock Gallery, November 6th in Dallas, Texas. And I know most of you are Houston, or some of you are in Dallas area. I hope you can come out to see this book. And so that's my talk will end. And thank you very much. And I'll just here to welcome any questions you may have.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. That was beautiful. I was so taken, like looking at some of the images. It was a very, I don't even know how to describe it. I think as an artist, you truly see the world in a, not just a different color, but in a different way. Being able to, I think you said using a broom and then putting that in your art, and just taking everyday things and kind of putting it literally in this picture moment, but not as in like a snapshot or a camera. It's just a different way to capture that moment, and that was amazing. I wanted to ask though, because you said earlier, you said about being more meaningful with the stroke, right? And I think that was when you had went back to Japan and to study a bit more, especially with calligraphy. And so I kind of wanted to ask about, as you were more meaningful with each stroke, what were your thoughts, or were there any thoughts or emotions before each stroke, or before you even started on an image?
Yeah, that's a great question that I should be able to answer really fluently for this one. But I must say that the brush mark, it's meaningful. And if I force myself to just be a specific meaning, and sometimes that, it's conflict. So the very first image that I show, no, actually one of the first, is it's based on the a series called decision making. And I was thinking about, like deciding something. I mean, like, deciding something is always hard for me. A and B, and then if I choose A, that means I'm just sort of not seeing B, and the fear of losing B kind of haunted me, so I couldn't decide. So I wanted to tackle with my work, and so for that case, I was really thinking of, okay, I am making decisions, and then make marks, or the because of that, the particular theme that I was going for. Within that, the many works that I did, the first portion, like couple of paintings are about making, like I'm just about to make a decision, or a couple of paintings are in the middle, like I'm not sure what to do, so everything is sort of fuzzy. And a couple of paintings at toward the end, it's more like, yes, I'm gonna do it. Like, whatever that decision was for, it's like, yes, I know what to do. So like I was immersing myself that the theme, and then I was able to really be, because it was really tied to me personally. I was able to sincerely making a mark that it's the same. The meaning was that the same with emotionally. I don't know. I hope it makes sense. But then later and later, I try not to, like more recent work, just try not to think at all, so that I'll make mark with a pure like noneness, and then I can react to it. And then once I started to see something, I can decide to conflict, I can decide to go along, and that way I know that that sort of emotional reaction is true for that moment.
Wow, that's so beautifully said. And it allows you to really be genuine and stay true to yourself as you continue your
Mhm.
painting.
Mhm.
Wow. And speaking of making the decisions, in the bio, I believe at first you were described as Japanese American artist, and so in most recent times we've kind of gone over the difference between Asian American or Japanese and Japanese American. How would you say that your identity as an artist has been framed by the label of Japanese American versus just Japanese artist?
Right. That's a great question. And I think it's just constantly changing. Gut level, I'm very Japanese, but then officially I'm Japanese American now. And but also, I'm here. I've been living in this country for the last 20 years. So I understand the portion of America. So I feel, American a little bit. And then but I was grown up in Japan, so I'm Japanese. I used to, learn English saying, I am Japanese, or soy de Japón, that in Spanish, like, but like that now it's changed. And so to me, it took me a gut to say that I am Japanese American. Actually, it was last year. Like somebody just mentioned, like, why don't you just say it? And like, oh, well, it was some sort of a grant application or something. But then as soon as I put that, it made sense because that described. I think America isn't, a lot of people coming from different country, and that makes America. There's no, like except the people who are here, Native Americans, like the other people are coming from different places and call it this place America. So I think we can just call it America, and whatever it means, and people just see it in a differently anyway. So you can just label however you like, and then sort of like title and then subtitle. And in our case, subtitle is just so long.
You're right. No, I'm so glad you say that, because I think I related to that as well, because I was born in the Philippines.
Mhm.
And while, I came here at a very young age, growing up in a Filipino household, these are the norms that I follow. And then when I go to school or I go to a birthday party with my American friends, it was like, oh, your house is not the same as mine. And it wasn't until last year I finally took on the label of Filipino American. I see, despite what the papers may say or despite what the documents may say. Wow, thank you for sharing that. And it does take a bit of kind of a vulnerable moment, and also a bit of a conflict, right? Just because either adding on a word or keeping it off doesn't change who we are, or who do we see ourselves as, or how do we present ourselves, especially
Right.
as an artist, right?
Right.
And so I did want to ask, like, now with the label, whether it weighs a lot or doesn't weigh a lot, how have you taken your art to the different audiences, right? Because you are a professor, and so I'm assuming the students that take your class, they're there intentionally to learn. But for some of the viewers at home, right, we may not be super into art, but I just kind of want to know, like, how does your identity go into, the audience, and how has it affected your audience or your target audience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really excellent question too. And then again, my answer is, just always changing. I think the more comfortable I am with myself, the like the viewer can be also comfortable with me, I think. Because they can take it however they want. I mean, that's the thing. The art is right here, and I'm just reaching this way, and then viewer can coming from that way, and then we meet through artwork. So recently, I think it's because of that the recent events in America, I started becoming more conscious, and then I was able. I'm invited to OAC, and I was sorry, OCA, that it is like I'm very honored, and then now I became more aware and more conscious about where I'm coming from. So before, so 20 years ago when I came to America, I am Japanese, so I'm foreigners, and then somehow, some point in time, I became a Japanese American. The foreigner becomes like I'm still foreigner in a way, but like it just shifted a little. So like doing the artwork and then trying to talk about my work, sometimes I need to give a people a context, and using those word or where I'm coming from kind of gives the audience a good context to understand my work. So I used to sort of not talk about my heritage with my work, but probably about 10 years ago, I started embracing more and more. You, you know, I'm yes, and you mentioned like I'm a professor now, uh, but so my teacher, my professors are saying few things, and it's of course stuck with me. So I know that like the weight of my word. One of them they said was, "You can only paint what you know," and I was like, well, "Of course, right?" But I was like, yes, and like, it just in that moment, I wanted to expand my repertoire by learning a lot, but also what I already know is in the equal area. So uh, and then perhaps maybe I should just learn more what I knew, so that I can actually explain more. And once I get started to understanding or studying a little bit of my the, the Japanese culture, I don't know, I shouldn't say like my heritage, it's just culture there. I started to like notice more like interesting things that I can find. So now I'm happy to want to learn Japanese culture. Next stop is actually Poland, because my husband is from Poland. So I want to know more about Poland, because now it's a adaptive culture that for me is another culture that I want to sort of really understand. So Japan is just it just happened to be that sort of path that I was taking. Um, I guess I'm not really answering your question. I just went off the tangent, but
No, that was beautiful. I really love what you shared. You only paint what you know, and
mhm,
it's similar to, with us as like community organizers. We always talk about our stories are the most powerful thing we have, who we are. And who we are and our stories, they're changed by our experiences, and we learn every day, right? And so who I am today will not be the same of who I am tomorrow because of all these moments. And so I love that, it's definitely, you paint what you know, because that's the story you have that you can
right,
tell.
right.
And so with that said, is there a piece, because I'm assuming, right, throughout your career as an artist, or who you are as an artist, your style has changed, or your paintings have changed because you were in different stages of life, right? Is there a particular piece that you've done that I think holds more meaning for you, or is the most meaningful to you?
Mm. The newest work all the time. The one that you're currently working on is the most meaningful one. um, it has to be.
Wow.
But I have to say that just as a image that I showed at the very beginning, the red kind of image, um, is really the beginning of how I'm approaching to art making. Before that, I was trying to mimic here, trying to capture beautiful bottles, the way exactly look like, and I was not sure what I wanted to say with it. So that I think it's 2007, that the painting that I did was the sort of tipping moment for me to accept like who I am and what kind of thing that I need to learn from here.
Sounds like a form of liberation. It
Mm.
feels free. Wow. And I think you talked about going back to research and study. And I don't know, like if you know about this, but OCA is part of a statewide effort, and this is going to be highlighted throughout our festival, that we are really trying to push for Asian American and ethnic studies in the Texas public education curriculum. And so, how do you think, you know, as adults, we've gone through school, or at least here for me, and for you as well, like we've gone through school not necessarily being taught what our heritage or who we are, right? Or you had to go back and study more. But this time students have a chance to be exposed to that at a younger age and not have to have that conversation waiting until they get into grad school or college. How do you think that journey will look for them if it is something that is passed, and what is a learning lesson that you wish students will take away from that curriculum?
That's a loaded question. I'm not really sure what I can say, but like the maybe I can just chip in by saying that when we sort of gather together, Asian American, so let's celebrate heritage. I love it. It kind of actually that month that we had, I was empowered, which is great. But at the same time, I hope that we are open to 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 others. So stand up together. It's a beautiful thing, and but I get just a little bit of a worry that I stand with this group. I stand with this group, and instead everybody just standing like I'm in this group. I'm in this group. Then, like there might be a little cloudy future with it. So celebration, and there is this kind of culture, that kind of culture is, I think, is wonderful, and I think it should. Um, but the way to construct the curriculum, I think it can be a really important issue.
I see. Right. It's yes, highlighting the stories and be proud of, who you are and being seen, but making sure that solidarity at the end of the day is what we strive for.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's spread out to all of us.
and it takes a level of thinking to remember that, because we can get so caught up in making sure that we are seen. But that does bring me to my final question. I did see some comments in the chat that people are enjoying this conversation, and thank you for being here. Thank you so much. And so my last question would be, just because, as a youth organizer, youth is always on the forefront of my mind, but a lot of our students are actually up and coming artists, or they want to pursue art after high school. And so what would be your advice for young art students or Asian American students who want to pursue art, but they may not feel seen or heard at the moment?
I came in art late 20s, or actually like mid 30 is the time that I just decided professionally. So if you feel that it's the passion, I go ahead. But don't worry, there are always something. And it's just the little dot for your space is there's always a little dot thing like for your space. And then if it's again the roots things, like if the little dot, I want to have the circle, I want to have more, then there'll be a tight society. But if you feel okay with the dot and it's a good dot, then and then things are just fine, and make it a very kinder world. Uh, so I'm really up, like lately, it becomes a little sentimental, but I'm really like trying to, how can uh, how can I contribute to the society where we can make a kind to each other? So that's just my forefront thinking for me. Like for my daughter especially, I want her to be kind to people, to her, to the place where we live in. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of again, it's off to the tangent, but young artists, if you feel that it's just a passionate, like a passion, you just have to follow. I follow my passion by traveling around, and then art came later. So it,
Wow, dear. I'm actually tearing up. Thank you. I feel, or I can hear the emotion in your voice, and it just touched me. Thank you so much.
okay. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Hi.
unfortunately, our and oh, we have someone saying thank you for your beautiful. Yes, thank you for being here, and just and thank you, Nishiki, for just sharing your beautiful art with us, and just sharing yourself and the vulnerability and your story. That's just, again, one of the most powerful things that we have to share, and it's our story. And so thank you for sharing it with us. Um, and thank you to OCA for putting such hard work in this festival. I'm excited. I've got goosebumps right now, and this is just our first artist talk. But I do want to tell y'all, those watching at home, to make sure that keep up with Nishiki as she continues to do more work. You can see her Instagram handle below. I've always wanted to be a YouTuber right there. Follow her on Instagram, Nishiki Sugawara-Beda art and nishikibeda.com. And I can't wait to see more beautiful work that you release. And just, I hope that we can cross paths again in the future.
Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for people
you.
who are tuning in, and thank you, Abby.
Thank you. All right, everyone, please stay tuned for our next workshop. I believe we'll be taking a quick break, and then I believe we'll be going over to Zoom. Just check out the website, and whichever workshop that you feel most inclined to go to, or check out all of them. Make sure to register, and also check out our raffle. Thank you very much.
Man, I think that video gets me every time. It gets me so hyped up for all the OCA programming. So hi everyone, welcome back to the live broadcast. Right now, Andrea's author reading and Q&A is wrapping up. If you were unable to attend, that's okay. It will be accessible through our website later on tonight or tomorrow morning. If you also missed out on Nishiki's artist talk earlier today, you are also able to watch it later on we are recording this live stream. So again, just a friendly reminder, we are doing raffles today. So we currently have a Humankind sweatshirt from Tinlun Studio. Please go ahead and participate in our raffle. Again, it's starryniteartsfest.com/raffle. And, you know, Tinlun was a featured artist, or Terrence Tang was a featured artist last year. And if please go ahead and follow him on Instagram and support him, right? And so I'm so happy to continue the rest of our live broadcast tonight. And I am so excited to feature Resound A Cappella. So today, they will be performing Grow As We Go. So Grow As We Go is a song about togetherness, how all of us are growing and how it doesn't have to happen by yourself. The song is connected to the group specifically because prior to college, some did not live in areas where there were many other AAPI people and found it hard to fit in with the different cultural norms of their peers and community. But the church was a place to congregate and to connect with others, with Christ being the core of their identities. In college, Resound was a natural place to find community through their common identity in Christ and love for singing. And additionally, for some, a place to share their experiences as AAPI students. Resound seeks to build each other up in all that they do with a mission to love Jesus, serve others, and share music. As a collection of students, a star in a greater constellation of humanity, Resound wanted to share a part of their community and an intersection of Asian Christian culture and the happiness and fulfillment that comes from growing together. So everyone, please enjoy Grow As We Go.
You say there's so much you don't know. You need to go and find yourself. You say you'd rather be alone, 'cause you think you won't find it tied to someone else. Who said it's true that the growing only happens on your own? They don't know me and you.
I don't think you have to leave. If to change is what you need, you can change right next to me. When you're high, I'll take the low. You can have my can flow. I will take it slow and grow as we go. Grow as we go.
You won't be the only one. I am unfinished, I've got so much left to learn.
I don't know how this river runs, but I like the company through every twist and turn.
Ooh, that is true, that the growing only happens on your own. They don't know me and you.
You don't have to leave. If to change is what you need, you can change right next to me.
When you're high, I'll take the low.
You can I see that it was better that we grew up together.
Tell me you don't wanna leave.
'Cause if change is what you need,
You can change right next to me. When you're high, I'll take the low.
you can have and I can fly.
And we'll take it slow and grow as we go. Grow as we go. Grow as we go. Grow as we go.
As we go.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Y'all, did you guys see that video edit? Like, how do they even do all of those screens and then the sound put together? Like, I know whoever made that video, props to you because that was very beautiful. But of course, just thank you so much, Resound A Cappella, for using your voices to uplift and make space of belonging and togetherness. So our next performer, Hyunja Shin Norman, is a passionate organizer from Houston, Texas. She uses nongak, a traditional Korean performance, to build solidarity and cooperation in our community. Please welcome Hyunja.
Hello, my name is Hyunja Shin Norman. I'm a community organizer with Uri Hunters. In the past, we helped our community fill out with the 2020 census and getting out the vote during the election. This year, we had many vaccine drives for our seniors. We serve Greater Houston area. We work with other Asian American communities to bring our voices and representation by providing with language translation. Knowing Asian American history, education, and stories is very important to me. Because we are part of America, we need to know our history, struggles, and challenges because we strive for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Today, we play nongak, which means Korean farmers dance. Nongak is a product of the working classes. It smells of the earth and overflows with the strong will and energy of farmers. Nongak enhances solidarity and cooperation in the community and establish a sense of shared identity among community members. That is why I choose to play nongak as an organizing tool. It binds people together beyond national origin.
일체 사람들을 모을 때 to gather people together. 상체 행진할 때 this is to march together. Now we are going to march together.
Yeah.
Hyunja, wow, that really energizes me, and just watching your performance, like, thank you for your work, again, your energy, and how you are incorporating the resonating sound of Korean instruments to mobilize and rally the community together. Just speaking on that, like using like our traditional instruments to kind of and again connect across generations, right? And actually one of the things that we want to, move into next is actually, how our voice can have is an empowering instrument as well, to break silence and just vocalize on what's happening, what's going on, right? So the next project I would like to feature. It's an ongoing project, actually. It's called AAPI Voice, and it's onto its third iteration, and it's used to center the HCRE, which is the Houston Collective Reimagining Education, and the push for Asian American Studies and Ethnic Studies here in Texas. And this project actually started in 2019 during the Pearland School Board elections. My co-MC, myself and two of our colleagues, Jenna Maravilla and Christian Toledo, alongside with Donna Kim Murphy, wanted to mobilize the Pearland community to participate in the local elections, right? A lot of our API community needs to step up when it comes to local elections, be more civically involved, right? Again, especially our students, right? And, our goal for this project was to collect the student voices and their experiences in the public school system, right? So, and this is what the project has evolved into now. So everyone, this is API Voice.
It's my freshman year of high school, and somehow, as a mixed Asian American student, I have already experienced discrimination. A few months ago, at the beginning of my fourth period class, my teacher left the class for a few minutes and said she would be back. The class just worked quietly on their work. A minute later, two faculty members came into the room. Teacher 1 walked up to the board and pointed out that we were writing something down about population density, which we were. Then he said that our class should know what that is because we were AP. I just continued to write. Then Teacher 1 pointed to me and said, "Hey, Asian girl, what's population density?" And of course I know what it is, but I hate being put on the spot, and I was in complete shock that I had just been referred to as Asian girl. Right after calling me out, Teacher 1 remarked, "Well, you don't fit the stereotype." Then he moved on to a kid sitting to the left of me and proceeded to say, "Hey, Indian boy, what's population density?" I sat quietly with my jaw hanging open and my face flushed red from embarrassment, but too scared to call the teacher out for his inappropriate behavior. Teacher 1 then stated that this student did not fit the stereotype either. Do you see me?
In 7th grade, I attended an Asian workshop which discussed the history and impacts of Asian Americans on the United States. Before this workshop, I had no knowledge of the great effects of Asian Americans on the America we live in today. I found it frustrating that I didn't learn about the history of my people in 7 years of schooling. Today, there are 18.64 million Asians in the United States and still no mention of Asian Americans in classrooms. Do you see me?
My first year of college, I took a class on urban culture and society where I centered my research on Houston's Little Saigon with a special focus on the Saigon-Houston Plaza. I scoured newspaper articles and archives to learn more. However, I learned the most through phone calls with my dad, where he would tell me the stories behind the Vietnamese migration from downtown to A-Leaf, the origin of Hong Kong City Mall, and the stories behind the businesses that we all know and love. These stories live within oral history, but they deserve to be in classrooms too. We're real people who matter. Our value currently lives within the services that we provide. However, we are not valuable because we serve. We are valuable because we are people with culture, history, and lives. We should be included in U.S. history curriculum, especially as this country continues to profit off of our pain and hard work. Do you see me?
I never thought much about diversity until recently. When I was younger, I always thought because we live in an American society, we would always have to follow the fundamental core American societal values, and that the perspectives of different cultures doesn't matter because we live in a particular country. But as I grow up, I've come to see that the perspectives and in the amazing work and the history of all people, including Asian Americans, that our voices do matter, that our experiences do matter, that our hardships, that our successes, that our lives do matter. And I encourage you to learn about the history of it, because I am slowly gaining back my confidence about my Asian American identity through learning. Do you see me?
I was 15 when I heard my classmates made fun of a book about a Chinese person's narrative. The book was called Falling Leaves. There were around 5 Asians in my class. I was silent as I listened to my classmates complain about how boring and stereotypical and irrelevant the book was. I didn't tell them that I loved it, that I related to it, that I felt aspects of the author's Chinese story echo in my Vietnamese one too, that I was moved because the book was the only one from an Asian narrator I had read in class for the past 4 years. Even for the rest of high school, I did not read much Asian literature in school. The book might not be relevant to them, but it was to me. Do you see me?
As a recent college graduate, I have had my fair share of history classes, yet throughout semester after semester, a 5 to 7 sentence paragraph covering quote-unquote Asian American history, mostly regarding the internment of Japanese Americans. I began wondering in high school, why are our ancestors' footprints not being learned about in depth, about within American history, and yet I am called quote-unquote Asian American, specifically Filipino American. Our present will turn to the future's history, and I really do want to ask, until when will our history as Asian Americans be negated out of the classroom? Be negated out of the discussion? Do you see me?
In world geography class, we had a unit over immigration. We discussed what it was, reasons for it, and we talked about the Europeans who came to Ellis Island, which is a good example and an important topic, but I would expect a world geography class to go much further and use even more examples and diverser examples. We cannot forget about all the Asians who have migrated here and are still migrating here. They are the fastest growing population in the U.S., and they are playing such important roles in jobs for our nation. Asian migration is very important and should be talked about. I was frustrated to see the lack of discussion over Asians in our world geography class. Do you see me?
I was still small enough to fit in the shopping cart. My mom turned away to get groceries, and the little girl next to me tilted her head at me, confused. "Why don't you look like this?" she asked, using her index finger to draw the corners of her eyes upwards. Her mother, right next to the cart, pretended like she didn't hear it. Years later, someone brought up the accomplishments of one of our Asian American classmates. Another classmate dismissed his accomplishments. "Well, yeah, of course he did well. He's Asian," he said, effectively diminishing his accomplishment to nothing. In middle school, a friend and I were complaining about the high costs related to being in band. She cut the conversation short by stating, "But Asians are all rich, so you aren't worried about this." We are not a monolith, and we are not a stereotype. We are deserving of credit, respect, and individual recognition. Do you see me?
When I was in high school, I took my first American history class covering content from 1492 to the present day. I never saw any mention of South Asian Americans like myself, and for that matter, Asian Americans within the first half of the course. But I figured that I would at least have 4 or 5 mentions of Asian Americans, one of which would include South Asian Americans in the second half of the course. I was wrong on both counts, and as I reached the end of the school year, I grew concerned that I would never have the opportunity to learn about these groups in class. One day, I expressed this sentiment to my U.S. history teacher, to which he responded, "Your people and history don't matter in this country." I can't remember much else about our interaction, other than feeling distraught from it. But since that incident, I've feared that I could never learn about the history of my racial and ethnic groups in America in a classroom, and that I could be erased from U.S. history in the future. Do you see me?
Do you see me?
Thank you for that powerful, powerful video. And just to remind everyone that these are these are our students speaking. And I think it's just to remember to realize that high school students are having to see this, right? As much as parents would want to shelter their children or anything, I think everyone needs to realize that our students face realities that we as adults face. I do want to take this moment to say hello to everyone if we haven't met before. But if we're meeting again, my name is Abby. I am a youth organizer for OCA Greater Houston and a joint youth organizer for Mi Familia Vota. It's been a pleasure being able to empower students and be empowered in return alongside high school youth as we learn the impact of our voices. Whether we are Asian American, Pacific Islander or not, we're all able to come together in solidarity to identify what issues harm our respective communities and how to advocate for ourselves and those whose voices are often not heard. A huge thank you to Mi Familia Vota for our wonderful partnership that results in our youth program, YELS, or to be spelled out, Young Emerging Leaders and Scholars. It's been an honor being able to see students grow and learn. We've done monthly workshops as well as passion projects, going from people who want to celebrate their identities and uplifting the LGBTQ plus community with our Youth Pride Parade, focus on mental health workshop, making sure that our identities are not erased whenever it comes to pursuing professional endeavors, things like that. And most recently, working on how to prepare our testimony when it's time to share our story and the most powerful thing that we have. And currently, also working on making sure to get young Texans registered to vote, especially in time for the local elections in November. The students that we've worked with have also founded their own civic clubs on their high school campuses, and continue to do the good work, not just in their school, but also in their neighborhoods, and have grown exponentially, not just as an organization, but as individual student leaders. And I'm so excited to watch them grow up and lead the next civil rights movement. I'm so blessed to work alongside amazing organizers, and that brings me to highlight this next facilitator who also does amazing work with our youth, and that is Audrey. Audrey Pan is a community organizer and is currently working to push for Asian American studies in Texas by mobilizing youth and making sure that their voices are centered in the movement. She is also a first-year student at City University of New York Law School. Please welcome this incredible organizer, my colleague and friend, Audrey.
Thank you so much, Abby, for that really, really warm introduction. And also, again, always for the amazing work that you do with our youth. Y'all don't know how much work that Abby puts in, especially in terms of like just always making time for our youth. I think Abby is someone who, you know, if there's a student who like needs to call her at any point of the day, like Abby is the kind of person who like sets aside time and like just like fits in youth in her schedule as much as possible. But without further ado, I'm super, super excited to be moderating this panel this evening. And just to give you all kind of a rundown in terms of what we're going to talk about, I'll talk very, very briefly about myself, the work that's been happening in Texas, the Asian American Studies movement that is slowly but surely growing in Texas, specifically in the K-12 area, and then a little bit about the collective, which we alluded to a little earlier in that video that you just saw. And then I'm going to be bringing on some amazing, amazing youth activists and organizers who are so incredible in their own individual rights. And then you get to hear from them about the work that they are doing in their respective schools and the ways that they are enacting change. So as Abby mentioned, I'm a community organizer at OCA Greater Houston, and specifically I'm focusing right now on getting our young people ready and excited to push for Asian American studies in Texas. And just to give you all kind of a background in terms of what we've been doing this past year, as a lot of you know, this was the 87th legislature meeting in Texas. And there were a lot of bills that got passed in Texas. And I think specifically Texas has been making a lot of headlines nationally. And one of the big areas that OCA has always been focusing on is education. And specifically, there was one bill that we were watching since the beginning of the term, which was HB 3979. And unfortunately, that bill did get passed and has now been codified into law and will be enacted actually later on this month. But just to give you all kind of a recap of HB 3979, it was a bill that we were against. And I know that there's been a lot of headlines recently around critical race theory. And this bill specifically is an anti-CRT bill, meaning that it's something that we are not for. And really this bill at its heart is about whitewashing history. And so we were very, very vocal and adamant about letting folks know why this bill hurts students and why it hurts public education and also democracy. And so some of our youth were able to testify and really get riled up from that. And so OCA as an organization has been advocating for Asian American studies across the country for a number of years. But we felt that this year, and specifically in response to all of the anti-Asian hate and everything that is going around in the US, we felt like it was really right now was the right time to really amplify and advocate for Asian American studies. And so that kind of brings us to our current moment right now. And so for folks in the audience who don't know too much about Asian American studies, Asian American as a term is actually relatively new. I know I identify as an Asian American. A lot of the folks that you're able to interact with and see today identify as Asian American, but it's relatively new. And really the origin story ties its roots back to the civil rights movement and also the radical student actions in the 1960s and 70s. And it was really the Third World Liberation Front, which was a coalition of student groups that was working together to really talk about longstanding racial inequality and inequity in the US that started demanding for the creation of programs that focus on the histories of people of color across the US. And so this was a lot of movement building that was happening across the universities. And part of this movement was pushing for Asian American studies and ethnic studies, right? This kind of emphasis that our narratives and the stories from our people deserve to be told in the classroom. And a lot of that was going on in California and eventually traveled across the US. And now it's been 50 years since that student movement. And Asian American studies can still be really hard to find. In fact, there are not that many schools in the South. I mean, specifically in the South, there's only one program at the University of Texas at Austin that has an Asian American Studies department and has funding to pay for Asian American Studies professors, etc. And it's incredibly, incredibly hard to find in the K through 12 arena, which is something that we are pushing for, right? We want students, and we believe that students should be able to get access to Asian American Studies and Asian American history much earlier on in their educational career, as well as access to other ethnic studies courses like Latinx studies, African American studies, etc. And it's really our hope that through Asian American studies that students get to not only learn about their own history and their own piece in the legacy of the Asian American movement, but also to build solidarity with other communities of color. I think oftentimes, you know, because we live in such a segregated society still, it's very difficult to actually find opportunities to meet folks from different walks of life, right? And really one of those places is in school. So it makes sense that we learn about each other so that way we can begin to learn how to live with one another and to support one another, to care and love and support one another. And so this is the work that we are trying to bring into Texas, making sure that Asian American studies and other ethnic studies courses get pushed to Texas public school classrooms. And so the video you saw earlier on today, where it was featuring student voices, a project really led by Rhea and Trish, AAPI Voices, you got to hear some of the narratives from our students, right, who they themselves, right, want Asian American studies, they want these ethnic studies courses. And so they are super, super active in the movement, because at the end of the day, it's their education that's getting affected. And so again, you're going to hear from some of the students later tonight. And so kind of in this political movement, political moments, we began to think like, okay, what can we do? And how can we also ensure that we are centering students' voices? Because a lot of times in movements, we forget about young people. We forget about the need to empower young people and to let them know that they have a stake in what is happening. And so that is how we kind of came up with the Houston Collective for Reimagining Education. And really, this collective is made up of both students and organizers and folks who want to get involved and want to help the movement. And really, we kind of see our goals broken down into both short-term and also long-term. The short-term goal is to get Asian American Studies passed in Texas, hopefully by next year, 2022. That's kind of our timeline and end goal right now. But really, the long-term goal is to not only push for Asian American Studies, but make sure that other ethnic studies courses also get passed as well. And to also make these courses mandatory, so that way, before you graduate, you had to have taken these courses. And hopefully this can create a pipeline of Asian American Studies majors and minors and teachers and professors, which we need more of in the field. And also create a community of activists and organizers who learn with and from each other. And really, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that students feel seen in the classroom and that they are able to grow up getting to know themselves and their histories and the ways in which their communities have contributed to the overall fabric of the United States. And lastly, we really believe that our movement is about reimagining and repurposing education to really fix our systems of inequality. And so oftentimes, right, our students are asking themselves like, oh, what can I do to fix everything that's happening? What can I do in my day-to-day? And really, our movement is about answering those kind of questions and using education as a site in which we are really challenging deeply oppressive power structures. And so kind of our timeline, again, is we are hoping to get Asian American Studies passed next June of 2022, and we are getting folks excited and ready to be able to testify next year. We want as many folks as possible in Austin, so that way we can show the State Board of Education members, like, look at all these folks who want Asian American Studies, who care about ethnic studies, who care about actually representative education and democracy. And after that, that's kind of like our first part of our movement, but then afterwards, it's again like getting it into the schools. And so we invite you to be a part of our movement and to be a part of what we're trying to build here. And later on, we will show our website on the bottom here. It's hcarteducation.org. And again, we'll flash that later on tonight, and you'll be able to learn more about how you can get involved specifically. So I've said a lot now, and I definitely want to introduce our students now, who I'm going to bring on one-on-one and get to hear from some of them. So the first person I want to introduce is Nabila Sultan, who uses she, her pronouns. She is a second-generation Indian American based in Austin, Texas, and is currently a senior at Westwood High School and is involved in various social movements, including this one, and initiatives in her community, such as Dear Asian Youth at Westwood and advancing the Asian American Ethnic Studies course. In the future, she hopes to become an oncologist and enjoys STEM courses, but will also like to continue her civic engagement by connecting with like-minded individuals to promote equality. Please, everyone, give a round of applause to Nabila. Awesome. The next person I want to bring on is Abby Vu. Abby Vu is a Vietnamese American from Houston, Texas, and is on the path of becoming a business major and entrepreneur. She displays her passion for empowering AAPI voices in her community through her work in Dear Asian Youth Houston and Cypress Falls ASA as a graphic designer and social media manager. Everyone, welcome Abby. And then next we have Eric Yang. Eric Yang is a first generation Korean American based in Austin, Texas, and currently attends Westwood High School as a junior. He pursues many social causes, actively designing and leading many groups of students in his community through programs such as Dear Asian Youth at Westwood, AACHI, or Music E United. And while he hopes to pursue law or business psychology in the future, he also enjoys watching K-dramas, exercising, or reading the news every day. Same here. And then last but certainly not least, we have Selena Wang. Selena is a second generation Chinese American based in Houston, Texas, and is currently a junior at Cypress Ranch High School, in which she hopes to pursue a future career in architecture. She's passionate about educating others on Asian culture and current events occurring in the AAPI community, as shown by her participation in the clubs and organizations such as OCA Houston, Dear Asian Youth Houston, and also Cypress Ranch ASA, working in the communications department. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to all our amazing students, student leaders, and activists. Yay, awesome. But actually, before we jump into the questions, something that brings all of you here tonight, right, is your connection with Dear Asian Youth. So I'm wondering if one of y'all could just volunteer to talk a little bit about Dear Asian Youth and kind of maybe its mission and the way that it's structured, like how many chapters are there, how big is the following, if you can give the audience some kind of a little bit of background.
Hi, so yeah, Dear Asian Youth is a youth-led global organization which works to promote intersectional activism, solidarity with other marginalized communities, and equity and equality. At DAY, we strive to showcase diversity in the Asian community as well as accurate and holistic representation through our digital platform, grassroots organizing, and community-based activism.
Awesome, thank you so much for that, Nabila. And with that said, I definitely want to kick off our questions. And there's so much to cover, but I definitely want to just start with kind of getting to know a little bit more about you all as individuals, and learn a little bit more about why you are involved in the work that you're doing and why you're pushing so hard for other young people to also get involved. So I would just love to learn, what was your experience like growing up as an Asian American in Texas? Did you experience any sort of obstacles or hardships, and kind of give us a little bit about, where you live specifically, because I know that everyone is calling in from different parts of Texas. Someone feel free to start, and then I will popcorn it to another person. Yeah, so when I'm a first generation Korean American, and when I first came here, I was faced with a lot of adversity because I went to a very predominantly saturated school community that was very much Anglo-American, white American. And so when people saw me, they would see someone that's different from them, someone that wouldn't understand what they're going through. And because of that, I felt a lot of isolation, and I was cut off from many of the events. And that type of isolation made me feel like something was wrong with me. And through this, and for many individuals, living as a minority member means that you have to live through these scrutinies and stereotypes. And many people that are part of the Asian American Pacific Islander community are very confused, and they feel very judgmental towards each other because of the adversity that they faced, and to other people because they don't know how to act because their culture is so marginalized and unaccepted in general life. However, because of my research that I've done about my own culture and about Asian culture in general, I've grown to love and be proud of who I am. And I would want any other confused Asian American individuals to find pride in their own cultures through education and activism. Yeah, I really love what you said, Eric. And I feel like everything that you just said right there is so relatable in terms of, like, at least for me, like growing up with like a lot of shame in my Asian American identity, also not feeling seen and feeling very different, and then shifting into this moment of pride, where I'm like, yes, like I love being Asian American. I'm so proud to be Asian American, but I feel like that journey to get there is still ongoing. And I'm wondering if any of the other students can relate. Did you feel shame at one point as a young Asian American growing up in Texas? Where are you now with your identity?
Definitely, because I grew up, so I live in Cypress, Houston, so it's a predominantly like white area. So I grew up like with a lot of white peers. I feel like a lot of Asian Americans can relate to this, is like feeling really disconnected from my peers, but also just not feeling Asian enough and not feeling white enough. So I've also been told by like my friends whenever I was in elementary school, they're just like, you're whitewashed and stuff like that, or you're too Asian. And then at home, or whenever I went back to China to see my family, like they didn't think that I was really Chinese and stuff like that. They would see like a cultural difference. So I guess being Asian American and growing up as an Asian American, you really don't feel like you belong. But just like Eric, I like slowly grew to love my identity.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I feel like at school I'm like super Asian to like my peers, I guess. But going back to like India, like I live in Austin, Texas, but like going back to India, it's always been like I'm very like quote whitewashed like in their standards. But yeah.
What about for you, Abby? Well, for me, I also went to school in Cypress, Texas, but I went to school in what is considered the more quote unquote ghetto area. So, for my school, it was predominantly Hispanics, Latinos, and African Americans. So I was surrounded by other POC, but I still felt like an outcast because it felt like I wasn't like the other POC. It's like, they kind of ignored my Asian identity. It was like I wasn't POC enough to be POC, but it's not like I was white either. So yeah, I definitely felt like an outcast when I was younger. I love it when I start with a question and kind of perfectly bleeds into my other questions. I'm really glad that you all have already kind of started talking a little bit about school, which is what our conversation is about tonight in terms of like pushing for Asian American studies in public school education in Texas. And in connection with your own personal stories, I'm wondering if you can talk about your education kind of journey. Did you go to public school? Where did you go to school? What was your school demographics? And also, did you learn about Asian American study in the classroom? If you did, what were the things that you did learn? And then if you didn't, what were some of the things that you wish you had learned?
Yeah, so I'm currently a senior and I've been going to a public school for pretty much my entire academic career. As a senior, I've taken like world geography, I've taken world history, US history multiple times throughout school. And even after like 12 years of history classes, I still don't feel like I've learned my own history. It's always been like stories from my parents or stories from my grandparents. And I think it's like so cool to see the Asian American Ethnic Studies course being passed into Texas, because I feel like it's the first time you're learning history with an Asian American focus and actually being introduced into the classrooms. But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm from Korea, and the only time Korea is really talked about is in the Korean War, which in my high school, they made it so that because of America's help or white people's help, Korea was saved. And it very much reinforced the white savior complex, where they imagined a white person in shining armor coming to save savages or people that are not as literate or as smart as Asian Americans. And so the fact that there is a new Asian studies course being implemented into our society and into our school curriculum, I think will really help people change the stereotype around Korea as a country that is indebted to the US, but not as a country that is indebted to the US, but a country that has its own culture that's also fiercely independent and also very much capable of becoming a global power, just like the United States.
Definitely. I'm a junior and I go to public school. As I said, a lot of my peers are white, and like there's just like a lot of people with different ethnicities at my school. But just going to school and like learning about history in general, if I felt really disconnected with the topics discussed in the classroom. So obviously we learn about like the Chinese Exclusion Acts and stuff like that. And funny story, this is literally 2 days ago, but I'm taking US history right now because it's required. I remember my teacher, which is also a coach, we were going over the topic over the Chinese Exclusion Act, and it really felt like he didn't care whatsoever about the topic. It was like one brief sentence and one PowerPoint slide, and all he told us to do was write it down and just remember this for the test. Like nothing further, but just like a basic definition, which is why I think that the just more coverage on these topics in public schools would be really important.
Yeah. And going into what Selena said, where it feels like in public schools, they don't really go into depth about the history of, Asians in America. And, during my own history classes, we would talk about other POC and what they did in history. And even now in high school, I always wondered, like, are Asians really not that significant enough for them to talk about us in American history? But the thing is that we are. It's just I never truly learned about it in class unless it was on my own time through my own research. And I really wish I had learned about very significant people in our history sooner, because I feel like it would allow not just me but other Asian Americans to feel less alone about what they've been going through this past year, and it makes you realize that like it's not you, it's not you or who you are, but it's the ignorance that these people have.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you all can speak to, how has that made you feel? I think you also kind of started a little bit, but, how does it make you, how has it made you felt like in your education journey so far that there hasn't been space in the curriculum about Asian Americans? Perhaps there was a sentence, perhaps your history courses have spoken about other POC groups, but the fact that, I guess, from what I'm hearing in your experience so far, Asian American history, it sounds like pretty much has not been covered at all. How has that made you feel? And then for Eric, going to school in Korea, with that kind of that framework that the school has taught, where the U.S. is this white savior and they're helping all these like Koreans who are illiterate, this and that. How do you think that has affected students growing up in Korea? So I want to start off with Abby, since you spoke last, and kind of talking about, how has that made you feel?
Well, specifically in class, it felt like, these teachers, like, they saw me, they knew that I'm their student, that I'm an Asian American, but it's like they didn't see that. They didn't see like my Asian identity, and they didn't see how important it was to show that in classes. Like, I just felt very unheard, and like my culture and the history of like my people are just pushed aside, and it's just another definition in our textbooks that we just have to memorize for a few weeks for a test, and then we just move on like it's nothing. But it's not nothing to me and to my families and my community, because things that happened in the past have still been occurring, because it's a thing where it's like, oh, if you don't learn about it, then history repeats itself, and it's because no one has learned about these things. So yeah, basically I just felt really unheard.
If I could just like go off of what she said, I also feel really unheard. Basically, just really transparent, and I don't know. You feel really transparent until the topic of something related to Asia comes up, because once something related to Asia comes up, all of your classmates start looking at you, your teacher looks you directly in the eye to talk about this topic. And I personally feel like if we did have more coverage and if we did learn about this stuff, it wouldn't be like such a big deal and stuff like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like in classes we're often like excluded out of the conversation in a way. And I think it's so incredibly important to learn about our own history as well as the history of other marginalized groups, because as members of the society, we need to be able to like seek out voices which have been silenced and recognize their contributions to history, all while uplifting and empowering the future generations and youth.
Yeah, I think not only will implementing Asian American cultures help Asian Americans feel empowered about their own culture, they'll also help other races also appreciate our culture as well. Because I have a lot of people that are from different ethnicities, different backgrounds that really enjoy the Hallyu or the Korean wave, which is like the wave of K-pop, Korean music culture, and things like that. And many people are wanting to learn about this, but they don't have the right resources, or they don't really have as much interest as to go Google or do extensive research on it. And so I think an Asian American study introduction in the school curriculum would very much help them take that first step into learning about and appreciating other Asian Americans' cultures, and even pursuing degrees or minors in those subjects.
Yeah, for sure. I think everything you all are saying, like, it's crazy because I'm not old, but I'm older than you all here, but it's crazy how like I'm much older, but my public school education was also so similar to what you all have gone through and are currently going through. And so for sure, this speaks volumes into, how much needs to still be changed. I'm wondering if, there is something that you all have learned about Asian American history, kind of if it was on your own, maybe it was through your family. I think oftentimes like we forget how much our families, stories and narratives also a part of Asian American history. And I'm wondering if you can share something that you learned on your own or through your family that you were like, damn, when you learned about this thing, you were like, why didn't I ever learn about this in school? Maybe something that kind of like surprised you or shocked you, or maybe even made you kind of sad or angry.
Something I had actually learned about not too long ago through day age was about Vincent Chin and how he was beaten to death. And I had really wished that that was something that I had learned in school, especially at a younger age, because like I said before, I really did feel like an outcast. And like going in on a personal, like when I was younger, when I was in first grade, I did get like jumped and beaten for being Asian because I was the only Asian kid in my class. And I remember at the time I truly didn't understand why. And as I grew up, I slowly did understand why. And it was like, oh, it's because I'm Asian. But like I said, I really wished I had learned that sooner and about what happened to Vincent Chin, because then I would know that when I was experiencing a lot of xenophobia at my school and in my community, it would have helped me feel less alone. And, it it would help me see that it's not me that's the problem, but it's these people's ignorance and their hatred towards something that I have no control over.
Abby, for audience members who don't maybe have never heard of Vincent Chin, can you kind of give a quick like synopsis about his story?
I can't recall all of the details, but I think what had happened was, I think Vincent Chin was, just like going about his day, and then he had encountered two white men that had mistaken him for being Japanese, I believe, and at the time people were being very hateful towards Asians just because a lot of Asians were like it was that whole thing. There were like Asians were like coming over and like stealing jobs. So he basically got beaten to death, and that is something that not a lot of people knew about until the Asian hate crimes came up and his story was kind of brought back up.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized that perfectly. And the person who beat and killed Vincent Chin, he never served time. And there's practically almost zero repercussions for him. He's still living, going on about his life. And kind of just to add on to what you were saying, Abby, like the reason why he was targeted was because during this time, a lot of the auto industry was getting pushed out to Japan. And so a lot of the people that worked in the auto industry in the US blamed Japanese Americans for them losing their jobs or them not being able to have as many jobs as they did before. But again, Vincent Chin was a Chinese American. These two white guys just saw him in a bar and they just assumed he was Japanese and beat him up. And really from that moment, that was one of those pivotal moments that really brought in Asian Americans. And kind of what I was saying earlier, right? Asian Americans is this very new term, right? Asian American encompasses so many different groups with so many different religions, cultures, languages, backgrounds. But it was kind of in this moment where Asian Americans were like, wow, even though we all are different, people here in the US think we are all the same. And so why not us kind of mobilize around that power? If they're going to see us as the same, maybe there's some power in that. And that's really how Asian Americans kind of came about and started banding together. What about you, Eric, Selena, or Nabila? Any piece of Asian American history that you've learned on your own or from your family that you wish you had learned in school or surprised you?
So when I was a lot younger, my parents would read me stories about Korea because obviously we came to the United States at such a young age that they didn't want me to forget my culture in Korea. And that was around the time I was in middle school and we were learning about the World War II, the Korean War, and the aftermath. And during World War II, Korea was occupied by Japan for a long time. And in the US, in the curriculum, in school, I learned that Korea was just taken by Japan and liberated by the United States Allied Army in 1945. But what the school curriculum did not explain was that Korea itself was also very, very, very strongly opposing Japan through peaceful protests like Gandhi and fighting back through their own wars. And because of that result, they were liberated. And what amazed me was all these youth activists like Yu Guan-sun, who died in prison at the age of 17 because she protested in the Korean national independence movement. And all of these stories combined just showed me how amazing and how storied and how rich my history, the history of my country is, compared to the drab, boring. They were annexed and then they were liberated by the United States version of the United States school curriculum.
Something that I had learned about Asian American history, like through my own research, was about the protests in Manhattan, Chinatown during the 1970s. I believe the dispute was over like constructing a Confucius Plaza. And basically this whole protest, this successful protest became the start of like the Asian American movement. And it led to like many other benefits such as like equal employment. And I guess you can say that it was like a start for Asian Americans and like getting their voices out there. And personally, I think it's really important and I wish I had learned about it because maybe I would have started or like done something related to Asian American studies or something like that earlier than now. And I just think it's a really powerful story.
Yeah, so my great grandfather was actually a freedom fighter in India. So I also work on like various campaigns and everything. So one really cool person that I learned about through my own research was Dalip Singh Sond. He was actually the first Sikh American and Asian American to be elected to the US Congress, which I think was so cool because it's always about like Indian representation or Asian representation in Congress and in the government. But yeah, that's what I thought. it's really interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm learning so much from all of you tonight. And I think all the different pieces of history that you all just talked about just goes to show that our communities are not just like idle, right? We're not just like sitting around letting things and politics kind of happen in front of us, but we've been actively involved like in politics, in struggle, in movement building, and also have contributed immensely to the United States and its formation. And I think that that in itself goes against so many stereotypes about our communities, right? I think oftentimes when people think of Asian Americans, they think of folks who are like silent, foreign, don't really speak up or have any sort of politics or like neutral on everything. And it's like, no, first of all, where we our families and our ancestry, like we come from places of struggle and we have brought that with us to the United States. So I think all of you just shared really, really amazing pieces of history and kind of what you were saying, Selena, about what was happening in Chinatown in New York City in the 70s. Like today, there's a lot happening in Chinatowns across the US, right? Right around that Confucius Plaza, a few blocks away, right now there's a lot of people protesting against New York City to not build a jail in Chinatown because New York City is trying to build a new jail and they're like, oh, let's just dump it in Chinatown. Like no one's gonna say anything, they're not gonna protest. And I think a lot of people are like, actually, no, we're gonna go to the streets and we're gonna protest. I think what's happening in Chinatowns in Texas, specifically in Houston, right? There's a lot of gentrification that's happening in the Asiatown area, right? There's a lot of businesses that see opportunity in land to kind of build up their own corporations, right? And so I think that is going to be a fight that all of you are going to see soon, right? Where there's going to be a lot of new development and they're going to want to push out community members. And so that might be a moment to kind of bring people together in Houston to be like, hey, no, you can't just come into this community and push out people that have been living here for decades, right? So kind of just tying those things together and kind of relating what's happened in the past and like also what is happening now. I want to turn now to the work that you all are doing in your respective organizations and also with Dear Asian Youth. I know that all of you hold different positions and are on different teams of Dear Asian Youth, but kind of talk to us about like, how did you find this space? Or, if you were part of making the first Dear Asian Youth in your school or in your city, like, how did that happen?
Well, for me, Dear Asian Youth Houston, we actually started with Selena reaching out to me, and it was initially to simply just reconnect after she moved to a different school, but it led to us forming Day H and becoming an official chapter during the middle of about quarantine. And sometimes it's just crazy to think back to where we were freshmen, like ongoing sophomores, and we were just bored during quarantine. And we just created this organization, and now it's become a very big thing in our community. And as the graphic designer of Day H, I'm really proud to say that like we've helped spread more awareness on issues, not just in the Asian community, but around the world to different minorities. And I'm able to do that through my graphic designing and other media such as video editing. So it's really nice.
That's super dope. Abby, I just want to ask a few more follow-up questions for you specifically. Like, I guess, how did you get it started? I know, like you said, like you and Selena were talking, and like this was when Selena was moving to a new school. Like, how did you actually start, like, like an organization?
It was really crazy because at the beginning it was very messy, and we didn't really have any guidance. Like to get to the organization and where we are today, it took a lot of work and communication. And like I said, it really did start with like Selena just trying to reach out because we were friends for about like 5 years already. So after she moved to a new school, she just wanted to reconnect with like all of our Asian friends. And in the midst of quarantine, like trying to build this organization, it really did bring us back together. And I remember it started us with getting on Zoom calls and taking notes by hand and just kind of having no direction on where our meetings were really going. But as we went on, we kind of found our positions in the board. Like originally I was actually supposed to be one of the co-presidents, but we originally were going to have 4 co-presidents, but at the end of the day, we realized that that would have been too messy. So I became a graphic designer, and I'm really happy that things turned out that way because I'm able to, exercise my skills in graphic designing and really grow as a graphic designer through work that I do for Day Age.
Yeah, so I came up with the idea of starting Dear Asian Youth around quarantine because that's when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and Asian hate went up so much at a rate that I've never seen before. My mom actually could not come into a Panda Express because they were afraid that she might have COVID-19. And because of that, and like the hate and the ignorance that was going on in my own community that I've lived in for about like 8 or 9 years, I decided to start Dear Asian Youth because we are the future generation, and I would believe that educating us right now is the best way to have a better future. And so I decided to create Dear Asian Youth. I DM'd Dear Asian Youth directly. I didn't really expect a DM back because they're such a large organization with around almost 1 million followers, but they DM'd me on how to start a chapter because I first originally asked if there was any way I could be involved, and they showed me all the instructions, and I started a chapter. And at first it was very rough. People were not in the best mental states. I had 2 or 3 people walk out on me when I was trying to start the club, and seeing that I had to just do it by myself, I just started the club. I held officer meetings. Nabila actually interviewed for the officer meeting. I saw the passion that she had and the care that she had for all of the organizations that she did. And so it was a no-brainer. I picked her as my VP, and it's been going great so far. We've had around 60 to 70 people in the span of 2 weeks that have responded in total as wanting to be a member. And we've already had our first meeting. We're planning on having a second meeting soon. And it's been honestly going great. It's amazing how many people support and care about the diversity and learning about other people and advocating for change and culture. And it's honestly been great. And it's very much influenced my view on humanity overall. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that introduction. But I'm Vice President of Dear Asian Youth at Westwood. So basically, I just saw an email about it sent from my counselor. After doing a little bit of research, I knew that this is something I really wanted to be a part of, especially with like my past experiences working with the ethnic studies courses and a couple campaigns. But I think the really cool part about Dear Asian Youth is that it's completely youth-led. So it's like students working along students, making a difference in the Asian community. And like Eric said, we had our first meeting and it was so great. And I'm so excited to see what this club's going to become in the future.
If I just like reach back to what Abby was saying about Day Age, yeah, definitely. It's honestly really crazy thinking back because our board and our club essentially started as an Instagram group chat of middle school friends, and then we eventually like got everything figured out. We had like Instagram, like we did Instagram video calls, and like we read emails together, stuff like that. And then just watching what we've done over the course of 1 year has been really crazy, especially because we're a community chapter, so it's not just like a school. I don't know, I got to meet a lot of new people, and we all just like bonded over the same thing, and like we understand each other and we know what we represent.
This is so dope. Like, I just find it so inspiring. Also, I follow all of you on social media, so I've seen all the work that y'all are doing. What is something that you all are excited about for Dear Asian Youth this upcoming year, like 2022? What is something that you all are working on, or are you guys working on any specific projects? What are some things that we can highlight from your respective Dear Asian Youth clubs?
Well, this is something we haven't announced yet, and it's in the works. But Dear Asian Youth Houston is starting a podcast where, although on our Instagram we go, we brush over topics and issues that are going on in current, what's going on in our world right now. But we really wanted to go more in depth into it, aside from our meetings and events. So me and Selena are some of the hosts for our podcast. And it's basically us not just talking about, the more serious issues and what's been going on in the Asian community and especially in Houston, but, more fun things like being able to talk about our culture and share that with others and being able to make sure that our voices are heard and, they can be heard from the background of you guys working out or on your way to work. So yeah, that's something that I'm definitely really excited for us to release by 2020. I'm sorry, 2022.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay, I'll go. Another thing that Day H is planning on doing, also in the works, and hopefully we can collab with OCA Houston to help us, is creating a My Little Library, probably set in a place where there's like more Asians. We specifically want Asian American authors and just like have their books there and let people like peruse our My Little Library. Also, we had the idea of adding books in different languages as well, because I know a lot of the older people, a lot of the older Asians, they don't read English that well, just like my parents. And a lot of the public libraries don't provide enough books over just in different languages for them to read. So I think it would be really exciting to just compile a bunch of books and like get donations in order to create one for our community.
So something that Dear Asian Youth at Westwood is doing is I was involved in like the Asian American Ethnic Studies course creation and everything, and we were planning on getting students, a part of Dear Asian Youth at Westwood, involved in the social justice movement, and we were hoping to collab with like OCA Houston and a couple other organizations to help them like build their own to testify in front of like the Texas legislature and really just like make an impact in the Asian community for the ethnic studies courses, because it's something that they've all like showed interest in and they're really passionate about. It's currently still in the works, but we're really hoping to get that started at Westwood.
Yeah, Nabila's been very, very passionate about this. This has been a reoccurring topic every meeting we have. We have meetings every Sunday, and every time Nabila's just texting me like, Eric, can I talk about my event this week? And we always talk about it. We're also telling our volunteers, and I think I've never done anything of this magnitude before, but it's so amazing how that high schoolers can like advocate to change the law, and it's amazing that like what we all can do if we just put our minds to it. I'm very proud of her, and I'm also very proud that like our chapter can do this as a group and as a community and as a body of students and as the future generation. So I'm very proud.
All right, I have 2 more questions for y'all. I think, first of all, I'm just so incredibly inspired by everything that all of you are doing and have said. And this is the reason why I love working with young people. Like all of you are just so full of like hope and also, but not just hope that's just like sitting in your minds and bodies. Like you guys are actually doing something, right? And like putting those thoughts into action. Oh my gosh, the question was, I was thinking about inspiration and the question slipped out of my head. Give me a second. Oh, the question was, okay, so all of you, right, as young people, I'm sure we have some young people in the audience who maybe like are, maybe have never been involved in like activism or have like don't know where to get started. What would be your advice to like, let's say a young Asian American who's listening in right now? What is something that you want to tell them to kind of activate their activism?
So activism isn't really defined by the magnitude of what you can do. As long as you have the passion for it, as long as you have the drive for it, as long as you have like the willingness that it will go far and you will make an impact, I think you can do anything, whether it be helping a person of color, an Asian American Pacific Islander, with like just taking out the trash, or like helping them read signs that they might not understand because they're first generation. When I first came here, my mom was she was also a first generation because she just came from Korea. She had no English schooling at all, and a neighbor next door, an elderly woman that was around 60 years old, she offered to tutor my mom for $5 a week and because of that, my mom has a job, and she's also pursuing her CPA license because of that one kind neighbor that decided that she was going to take the time and effort to teach something that she was used to, but my mom was an entirely different pathway to life. And I'm so grateful to the neighbor. And I just believe that activism and anything that you can do for anyone is enough to the world, because as long as you're making change, you're doing what other people might not even start, and that's already making a significant impact in the world.
Definitely. What I would want to say is probably, just like from my own experience, don't be afraid to actually get into activism, because a lot of other people have had the same ideas as you have. So I think being brave about it and like actually accepting your identity is really important.
Yeah, and kind of tying in what Selena and Eric had said, you really shouldn't be like a pessimist about the impact you can do, because even myself, like I will show my mom the presentations that we show at Day Age, and I've basically been able to change her mindset and her perception of other POC and other races, and she's transferred what she's learned from me to her coworkers. So knowing that makes me really happy, because I was able to change my mom's perception and mindset on, like other minorities that she's had for about like 30 years. And it's just that like I wanted to put that out there so that, other people my age or even younger can see that despite their age, they really can make an impact. And, at the end of the day, age is just a number. Like you are not less likely to make an impact on others just because you aren't adult yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like no matter your age, you can definitely get involved in activism, whether it be volunteering for nonprofit organizations, working on different campaigns, or even with like Dear Asian Youth, you can start your own chapter at your school in your city. You can also look at like upcoming events in your area, protests, any of those, and those are all really good ways to get involved in your community and active.
Before we turn to our last question, we do have a question from an audience member specifically for Dear Asian Youth Westwood. How does your location and proximity to our state capital shape and inform the work you do? Really excellent question.
I can take this one. Yeah. So Austin is kind of considered like the liberal capital of Texas, where there's a lot of activism in the downtown area. And I'm very grateful to live in Austin, where I can see so much diversity, so much community. Like in ACL and other places like around Austin, there's so much diversity. There's so many people talking to other people, regardless of backgrounds. Like they're just old friends. And I think a lot that like, I'm very glad that I live in Austin, where I can see so much diversity. And I think being in Austin has helped me find other organizations such as AAPI, which helps first generation elderly Asian American Pacific Islanders. It helps them go to the hospital or take care of any things that they would be unfamiliar in the United States. And it's just opened so many doors for me, and it's just shown me how much I can do, and all the broad like opportunities that we even as high schoolers, can do and make an impact on the world. And I'm very grateful and lucky to live in a place like Austin.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that you all have galvanized a lot of audience members. How can our audience members find you all? What are your social media handles? If you all have websites, what are your links?
Well, you guys will be able to check out Dear Asian Youth Houston on Instagram, which is dearasianyouth.houston. We're also on Facebook, just Dear Asian Youth Houston. And yeah, we mostly promote ourselves and our meetings and everything we do on Instagram. So you guys should definitely check us out and follow us.
Day at Westwood is on Instagram at day_Westwood_high school. We post on there for upcoming events, meetings, etc. You should totally go follow us. Thank you.
Awesome. And are we going to be able to see all of you June 2022 to push for Asian American Studies in Texas? Yay! And hopefully around that time, y'all will be able to get other Dear Asian Youth members and also other perhaps maybe like just other school members involved as well. And it's really honestly my dream and my hope that come next June, there's just like hundreds and hundreds of like young Asian American high schoolers and also non-Asian high schoolers, right? Folks who I want to say, like, just because we're pushing for Asian American studies, it's not exclusive, right? This kind of history is really for all students, as well as, you know, for us as Asian Americans, it's important that we also take other ethnic studies courses. But it's kind of just like my vision and dream to see like hundreds of high schoolers in Austin next year, really telling the state board, like, hey, this is stuff that we care about, and we are the ones who should be in control of our own education. It was so lovely speaking with all of you today. And again, like, you all just gave me a lot of energy and kind of reminded me of like why it's important that we do the work that we do, not only to help others, but also to really get the next generation up and involved in activism and in politics. So thank you, all of you. With that said, I want to bring back our amazing hosts and folks who've been putting together this amazing programming for all of you. Trish, Rhea, and Abby.
All of you guys are so amazing. Like, thank you so much, Nabila. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you so much, Selena, for sharing your experiences, your stories, and again, sharing what all of you are just driven to do to push Asian American studies for like K through 12. Like, so super excited to like to know that you'll be there in 2020. Yeah. Again, like, major shout out to Audrey and Abby for like holding these, like, cultivating and holding these safe and brave spaces for our youth to really have these critical conversations and just connecting us with the students, like as colleagues and of course as friends that I know. Like, y'all amazing, y'all beautiful people. So I just want to give you like a really huge shout out and like give you all the love. Because without the both of you, we wouldn't be having like this wonderful programming tonight. So thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Trish to talk about our website, and of course, we're just going to, you know, review like what's upcoming. This is only day one, guys. So
yes, this conversation is still going to continue for the next 4 days, right? And we're having another roundtable with youth on Sunday. So again, we're going to start with a conversation with youth and end it with youth. But please check out our website at starryniteartsfest.com. You can find our artists, performers, and authors featured. Please sign up for their workshops. And thank you all for being here. Abby, Audrey, any workshops or folks you two are looking forward to? Abby?
Audrey, go ahead.
Definitely Livia Blackburn. I loved her children's book. I love Popo. I mean, I know it's for children, but it was very deeply moving. I think especially because growing up, I never read any children's books by AAPI authors. And I don't know, when I read it, I was just like thinking like, damn, if I read this, when I was little, like, I feel like it would have changed so much.
Yeah, that's true. Like the efforts that people are putting in today, walking into a Barnes and Noble the other day, seeing the children's shelves, and then there's like POC like cover, book covers. It's like, what the heck? My childhood did not look like that, right? I think I'm looking forward to at the Pinky's workshop and the next youth roundtable. The conversation today was just amazing. I was like screaming from my chair, and so just to really like get to know the minds of the youth and learn from them, right? Like they're amazing, and I'm just impressed, and that's what makes honestly it's been just so rewarding being a youth organizer because I get to see them do that and really learn from them. So I'm so excited for the rest of the lineup.
Agreed. Like I'm personally looking forward to authenticity and in art making, redefining an artistic calling by Ulia. They're also performing tomorrow night, so please check them out. I'm also looking forward to, I think all the workshops really, but like I know Anthony Pagliano is going to be another workshop that's closing. I know that he's going to be demonstrating like a weave, so traditional like banig, so it's like a straw mat, and you really using that metaphor of the banig of weaving our communities together and our stories together. So really looking forward to that. Just one final thing about the raffle. The raffle ended, so winner will be announced. Yes. Today.
Yes, the winner will be announced in 1 minute.
Oh, is that right? Okay, 1 minute. So should we stand by?
We should stand by.
Okay.
But all of the workshops, everything that Audrey, Abby, and Ria mentioned, and that they're excited to be present in, is you can check it out on our website, y'all. So make sure to visit starryniteartsfest.com.
Oh yeah. If you missed anything,
we'll see you there. What?
Yeah, if you missed anything, actually, you can always go back because all of this, the live stream is accessible. The Zoom, these closed Zoom calls are accessible to all of you. So yeah, check that out.
All right. So Ria, do you want to mention the winner?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay. Sure. So the winner tonight for the raffle is Jessica Lee.
Woo! Jessica.
Jessica! Thank you for participating in the raffle. Everyone, please, raffle's happening every day. So, type in your name.
Yes.
All that.
And Jessica, we will be sending you an email with all the details. So please keep a lookout for that. And
yeah, no, guys, thank you for attending day 1 of Starry Night. So take care and good night. We'll see you tomorrow.